Yo, what's good, YouTube? It's your boy Izuku, aka Ninja, and I'm here again with another video. This one is a Blue Lock series, which I'm gonna exchange the two Blue Lock series I currently have on out for maybe, because I always say I'm gonna do this, then I don't do it, but I might change. I might take off the two that I'm doing currently for this one. And that's because I like the concept behind this one. Don't get me wrong, I love the other two. Kuroko Isagi one is, it's doing well and I like it a lot. And the Isagi and the Isagi Metavision and UI, that one has been fun to do. And as a matter of fact, I made that one originally a year ago, but I never posted it because that was around the time. Well, not a year. That was one of the first series I had in mind, but not a year ago. Not like when I first started my channel, but I think it was around the time. Was it when Blue Lock first dropped? I think it was. But around the time when Blue Lock first dropped, and I found out about Sei, and whenever Sei Itoshi was into a group, during the U20 match, and I was seeing all these people dissing my boy Sei. I was like, what? Just because he didn't want to be a striker no more, I was like, all right, so I guess you can't change for it, But I was like, since he's already a midfielder, why not? And that's when I started making that idea. It went through trial and error 6 times. The first time it was pathetic. I did not like it. The second time it was alright, but I felt like something was missing. And the third time it was also alright until I fucking broke my phone. Then the fourth time it was better, but also slightly worse than the third one. And so it never got out because I kept changing it. And then I started making a fifth one, a different variant of a way of approaching it. But again, I didn't feel it. The 6th time was perfect. It is not the one that you saw that are seeing. It's because, like I said, I have a shit memory. So when I broke my phone for that week, even though that's all I was thinking about is, okay, I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna do this. I need this, and that. I got the phone back. I'm thinking, all right, the idea is still going to be in my notes. I checked it. It went there. Yeah. So we got the one that we got today. But, I've been ranting on that for 3 minutes. And I'm going to shut up. One sec. I did not mean to press start it back while drinking water. But we'll stop that there. Now, let's try this again. What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Izuku, aka Ninja, and I apologize for all the background noise. You won't be hearing this on my water for the most part, but you will hear this annoying ass bed. I do not have the TV to strike me this time, and the ceiling fan is still annoying as shit. I might go turn it off because I got my other fan. It's not on right now, but I'm pretty sure my normal fan is louder than the ceiling fan. Hold on a second. Let me check that, baby. It is, in fact, a lot louder than the ceiling fan. Alright, this bed just gonna be loud as shit for no reason. Well, I know I'm moving around and shit, but yeah. I need to get into this story. Okay. I'm a lock in. I'm a lock in. As soon as I get this table straight, fix the microphone. Yeah, I might have to put a noise warning at the beginning of this because, yeah, everything is so loud with this microphone. I would turn it down to medium, but I already started at max volume, so I'm going to just have to tell y'all to not turn y'all phone all the way up while listening to this. Or don't drop this and just drop the text and story version, which I did for one series. I didn't like that I did it, don't get me wrong. I fucking love that series. It's just I didn't posted onto the thing. I can't remember which series it is, but I just know I liked it. I don't even know if I don't know if I posted it. No, I did. It was the Life and Death Deku. I got part 2 on my phone right now. I've completed it. I got a whole movie in my phone that I have completed that I need to drop, which is gonna have 2 different scenarios: the Return to Hero version and the full on Vigilante version, which is gonna be longer than the Hero. Yeah, I won't spoil any of those, but yeah. Let's just get into this. And I've been talking for 5 minutes. I apologize. I just went completely off track on what I was supposed to be doing. And y'all had to sit through that for 5 minutes and for 6 minutes. uh yeah, so I'm just gonna start now before I sidetrack once more. Now, as you can see on the screen, that is a young Isagi. And you might be wondering, why start there for this story? And it's gonna make sense when I start to explain it. Now, we start off with a 5 to 6 year old Isagi, like displayed on the screen. I'm sorry about that loud ass noise that you are hearing. I was fixing up my microphone on the stand because the shit started moving. But yeah, we start with a 5 to 6 year old Isagi as he's playing against his friends but they're in a not a training camp per se, but it's like a beginner's version of a training camp. Basically, just all the little kids playing around, and they're seeing who they will recruit into the training camp. Basically, that. And Isagi would be seen as lucky. His field of vision. Yeah, I said that right. His visual prowess is very wide, but they don't know that. To them, Isagi just seems very lucky because every time one of his teammates passed the ball prematurely, he's always there to get the ball. And it's because his visual, like, he could see just very far. And it's almost as if he could see people do stuff before they do it. And he came to understand this as Isagi he is very smart for his age. And Isagi would just kind of smirk as he would dash upfield and easily score. And his parents would be cheering, but the coach would be confused as, why is this kid so good? Actually, I don't even know what I was gonna name this. I mean, I know what I'm gonna do with it. Don't get me wrong. I know that I just randomly stopped. Maybe I should pause this. Yeah, I'm gonna pause it. Hold on. Okay, I changed my whole idea thing for this video. I mean, I still got it's the same. It's the same concept, just the title isn't the same that it was gonna be. Originally, this was gonna be what if Isagi gained metavision early. But now I have a better idea. Yeah, it's gonna be way better. Alright, so continuing. The coach would think, why is he so good? Like, what's up with this kid? 1 second. If you hear something in the background, I apologize. I would go see if he's on his way back in, but I don't feel like doing all that. So if you hear a door slam, it's my cousin coming back in because my room is legit next to the back door. Yeah, back door. I mean, I have a thick ass door, so you probably won't hear it over my voice, but just in case. I mean, I'm pretty sure you hear all the shuffling, and I'm not yelling. Yeah, I'm sure you just heard that. And that. And his loud ass voice. Hold on. Alright, I'm back. And he should be gone, and you hear all this noise. Wow. I'm sorry. Oh, right. So, like I was saying, the coach would be confused on why this kid was so good. But the other recruiters would just chop it up to Isagi being lucky. since he always showed up in, to them, lucky spots. And Isagi's playstyle would be very selfish. He wouldn't pass unless he knew his teammate would pass it back. And for the most part, Isagi was pretty buff for his age. Something wasn't right with this kid, but they would write his name down nonetheless because they saw the potential in Isagi. He was just a bit selfish, and no one knew why. His parents always saw him being a fan of Noah. And to them, they always thought Noah was a bit selfish, but he passed as well. So, I mean, hey, even if he took shots, he still passed, and so was Isagi. So to them, they just thought it was they just thought that's how football is. And Isagi would be very good at it to them. So they would cheer on their son happily, seeing that he was out there pursuing his dream. But now we go to Isagi's POV as we understand what's going on. But to fully understand that, let's go back to when he's first born. When Isagi is first born, and he first opened, well, not first born, but when he finally opens his eyes for the first time, Isagi would be confused as he'd move his arms and look at him, as he'd say, wait, am I a baby? But it wouldn't come out. His brain would think it, but he wouldn't be able to say it. And hold on. You okay? Ooh, shit, I started it. My fault. I'm gonna sit you down real quick, yeah? Okay, he in fact did not want to be sat down. I apologize. So this is my cat, you know. He's just chilling. I'm about to. I really gotta sit you down. I gotta continue. Okay. Okay. Yep. All right. So, yeah, let me move that bowl out your way. So after all of that, Isagi's team. Oh shit! I forgot where I was at. My fault. I was thinking of something when I came in, so I didn't. Yeah, but yeah, like I was saying, Isagi would look at his hands and think I'm a baby, and he would try to talk, but obviously he can't. So he would think, okay, I got a second chance. Wait, how the hell did I die? What happened? And the first thing that came to mind was he died while playing in a match. But that wouldn't be right, as he wasn't playing a match. He was just asleep. One sec. Alright, I'm back. So, yeah, Isagi would, like, he'd be like, wait, don't tell me I died in my sleep. That's so fucking lame. But, you know, he's exerting energy to move his arms. But then he gets an idea. Wait. This might be a great opportunity. If I can do everything again, but as I am now, I can be better than I was when I first entered Blue Lock. And if I'm better than when I entered Blue Lock, I could become number one quickly. But the thing is, I'd have to find Bachara. Because without him, well, I don't want him to fail out in the first exam or the second. He's my best friend after all. And he would start to fall asleep, but he wouldn't go to sleep without saying, okay. Well, thinking, okay, that's the plan. I get better. I find Bachara. I train with Bachara. We both get better. And we conquer Blue Lock. And now we go back to the match where Isagi is completely dominating the field by himself. Sure, sometimes he pass off to pull off a move, like getting in other kids' blind spots. Even the coaches wouldn't be able to. 1 second, my cousin, my cousin is being annoying right now. Hold on, sorry about that. But I'm on top of the microphone right now, so it's probably a lot louder than when I left. But yeah, Isagi would completely dominate the field using moves and techniques he remembered from his past. He wouldn't be going all out, as the only real techniques he was using was getting behind in people's blind spots, stealing passes that weren't meant for him, but he stole them in a way that it looked like they were meant for him. And that's why the coaches was calling him lucky, because he always just somehow appeared when his teammates were passing or when they'd lose the ball. He'd just show up. And Isagi is buff, or like he's a buff-ish looking kid. Like he's not extremely like ripped, six pack, like he's not that. But Isagi, since the day he could walk, he was running. And after that, he was doing push-ups, sit-ups, and anything he could handle. And he would be pretty buff. He'd be a pretty buff. Well, for a 5 to 6 year old, he'd be pretty buff. And after the practice match of sorts was over, the people would go up to Isagi's mom and dad, and they would scout for him to come to their program. As I'm gonna say, this is just my, that it was made by, well, it was funded by Noah, or whatnot, right? And Isagi, hearing that, he would smirk as he'd be excited, but then he would remember his past and how he kind of told off Noah, spoiler alert, as he would think, well, that won't happen just yet, so I'm not really worried. And he'd smirk, seeing as he doesn't remember this offer coming to his parents after the match he had before. He just remembered playing. And we go elsewhere to Kid Bachira, who's playing with the kids. And I'm going to say Isagi and just knows where Bachira, like Bachira explained everything, like about his past and stuff. And Isagi knows. Hold on. Sorry about that. Got a little hungry. But yeah, I'm gonna say Isagi knows but for right now, we go to Bachira's point of view, as he's in a match and some more scouters that look like the ones that were for, the people Isagi was playing with are there, and he would notice they have the same logo. And he would see that no one could really keep up with Bachira. And the people weren't really focused on Bachira. So Isagi would go down, since, Bachira is playing with his monster and his passes weren't really going where they should. And I'm going to say Bachira's team was missing one. And Bachira would pass in a space that no one was in, as he saw the monster was there. And the people who were there would just be confused, and they just go to mark his name off. But Isagi, out of nowhere, would trap the ball and run off. And Bachira would start to smile and smirk as hard as he could, as he'd see the monster following, and Isagi is keeping pace with the monster. And so he'd run to catch up, as Bachira and Isagi would clear through the field. And everyone would question where Isagi came from, but they wouldn't care, as they'd see Bachira, and they wouldn't see Isagi's name, but they would call the people and they'd say Isagi was already, Because I'm gonna say, by the way, 2 days passed. I'm gonna say I gotta make that known. 2 days has passed since then, since Isagi was scouted. Now I'm gonna say it's the same people that scouted Isagi, so they know Isagi was already scouted. But they'd still be confused where he came from, but they wouldn't really question it, thinking Bachira is his friend and he was just late to the game. And so Bachira and Isagi would completely dominate that field. And not saying that Bachira, as you know, wasn't already cooking them in the flashback, and they beat up on him because they thought he was weird, but still, they'd clear the field. And when when they're done, the people would call Bachira weird, and Isagi would stand up for him and like legitimately would beat the shit out of little children. And Bachira would help. Like Bachira would help as he'd see Isagi was, like he was handling those children. And, him being a buff kid, he's punching the shit out of, little kids. But Bachira would jump in and the people would have to stop the fight. Like I'm gonna say adults that were walking past would come through and they'd see it, stop the fight. But Bachira and Isagi were already signed up for this program. And Bachira would take Isagi to his house and he would be introduced to his mother. Isagi would compliment on how Bachira's mom is very pretty, and he'd be confused, but he'd say he sees where Bachira gets it, how Bachira was able to get his egotistical side very easily, since his mom is very creative and he understands why Bachira's dribbling is also very creative. And after this, they'd go to Isagi's house, and Bachira would, his antics would be very confusing to Isagi's parents, but they would accept him, and Bachira would be happy to be accepted by more people. And I know I keep pausing and going, and it's because I keep hearing shit in the background and it's getting annoying. I might go turn that off, but I don't feel like getting up. Yeah. Sorry about that little rant. So, anyways, after this, I'm gonna say 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks have passed, and Isagi and Bachira have been training together a lot. Hold on. I'm sorry about that. I should have paused it like I normally do, but it came up too fast. It got me. It was a burp. I apologize. Why am I talking so low? Like every time I talk, my voice goes down here. So yeah, you might don't have to turn down your volume because I'm not yelling, but I'm not talking real loud either. And yeah, I didn't notice it until now, but okay. All right, yeah, it's on max volume. Just had to make sure. So after this, the people would come 3 weeks later, but before that, 2 weeks would have passed, and Bachira and Isagi would be a great duo. And Isagi would be smirking as early on, Bachira's dribbling was already good. And Isagi wouldn't try to force his version of dribbling onto Bachira, as Bachira's dribbling was already impressive. And Isagi, knowing Bachira's dribbling style, would give him little hints on trying to get him towards how he was at the start of Blue Lock, since, not everything is going to happen the same, since Bachira won't be in the same, how should I put this? What was the word? He won't be in the same predicament he was in before, because in the past, up in the first world, where up in the original, Bachira wasn't scouted for any type of club. I want to say club, team. I can't remember. Damn. He wasn't scouted for any program. We gonna leave it at that. Yeah, he just kind of invented his own creative dribbling style himself with the help of his monster. And Isagi would have told Bachira early on that he has to get rid of the monster if he wants to improve. But Bachira wouldn't take this to heart, as he'd say. I mean, okay, like he just kind of ignored the monster, seeing as but Isagi already keeps up with him pretty well, and the monster is sometimes slacking behind Isagi anyway. So you know, and so like I said, for that whole 2 weeks, they would have grown together. They would have played a lot, and they would have figured out they are a great duo. Well, Isagi already knowing this and being grateful that he could meet up with Bachira early on, and this camp might help him. Yeah, why did I say it like that? Might help him at his hold on, spatial awareness a lot, since he's trying. His goal is to awaken metavision before the start of Blue Lock, and Isagi and Bachira, after when they get scouted, well, were alarmed. They would be picked up by a bus. They would be picked up by a bus the following week, and they would be taken to this facility. Hold on, grandmother in the background. Hold on. All right, I'm back. Let me lean this down up a little bit. There we go. So yeah, like I was saying, they would be taken by bus to this facility, and it would be nothing like the Blue Lock facility, but it slightly would be. It would have a practice field that they could play on, but it would be multiple in one field. They would all be, it'd just be multiple on one field. And it'd be one big ass field with a whole bunch of, practice fields on them. Yeah, don't want. All right, I won't explain it much further. And then it'd have rooms and all this other stuff. Obviously, they won't be staying at the facility unless they had their parents' signature, which Bachira and Isagi both got, since they wanted to spend as much time as they could training. I don't know what the fuck is going on. My speech is becoming very slow, and I do not like that. One sec. All right, I'm back. My cat is under me moving, so don't mind. Yeah. Please ignore that. Anyways, ow. Anyways, where the fuck was I? Oh, right. So they would be placed in rooms by two, and they get to choose the person they wanted to be with, since most people came with their friend. Isagi obviously chose Bachira, and they would be placed in a room, and they would see that the rooms have another room. And obviously they have a bathroom and, a changing room. They have all of those because, they have outfits that. Anyways. Sorry about that. I stopped to focus on see what my cat was doing. I apologize. Okay, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Why am I talking like this all of a sudden? I'm getting tired of it. I'm not tired. I don't think. Yo, what is you playing with? How long? I've been at this for 28 minutes. Wow. I gotta get excited and talk like this. I apologize. I might have to move the microphone back, but I'm getting tired of talking like this. It's getting annoying. So I'm gonna have to find a middle ground. So about right here. All right, we're gonna leave it at this. So like I was saying, they would have a changing room, a bathroom, and then they'd have another room that was straight across from the entrance door. And they'd have two beds up in the main room with a TV that, obviously they're children, so, TV. But they would go through the other door as they'd see a field. And for this field, it'd be multiple soccer balls, and it's obviously a soccer field, football field, whatever you want to call it, soccer field, right? So Isagi would, like that he has his own field to train with Bachara personally, and he'd see it has no cameras there, and like obviously, why would they want to spy on children? They're children. What's the worst they can do in a room with lights and a field, you know? So Isagi would, play around, and Bachara would join him since they came to train. They didn't come to play around. But Bachara as a child, he's still goofy, and he wanted to play around with Isagi. And Isagi would ask him a question: "What drives you?" And Bachara, being a child, would be confused as Isagi would say, "What's your goal?" And Bachara would say, "I just want to keep having fun. I mean, that's what the monster inside me is telling me." Hold on. Sorry about that. I ain't eating nothing all day, so looking at the food in front of me is very tempting. And so I keep grabbing a piece and trying to eat it, forgetting I have to pause. So y'all don't have to hear all them crunching. All of that crunching. Sorry. Anyways, Bachara would say, "I just want to have fun." And Isagi would say, "You have to dream bigger than that. Like, after you're done having fun, what, you're just going to drop soccer? Well, football, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to keep saying soccer because, yeah, it's just secondhand that whenever I'm talking about soccer or football, it comes out as soccer instead of football. You feel me? So, yeah, Bachara would say, "Well, I mean, I don't have anything else. I mean, I didn't have friends before you." And Isagi would say, "How about this? Let's become the best we can. And one of us becomes the number one in the world." And Bachara would say, yeah. And Isagi would say, "Let's win a World Cup." And Bachara would be, like he'd get excited as his first flares of ego would start to flare as he'd say, "And I'll become the best dribbler ever." And Isagi would smirk as he'd feel that Bachara had finally awakened his ego. And Isagi would smirk as he'd flare his own ego. I know it's not a power or, but like their eyes start to glow and they have this aura around them. Just imagine that when I say flare ego. Like when it first embers and sparks inside of them, it starts with their eyes, then they, the spirals in their eyes, then the aura in their eyes, and the aura that surrounds them. Yeah, basically that. So, Isagi would, as Bachara would leave because he was tired of them training, as they finished running, doing push-ups, sit-ups, doing all that. As Bachara would try to keep up with Isagi, but it wouldn't work. As Isagi has been doing this for the longest, and he could do 100 push-ups straight, 100 sit-ups straight, 100 squats. Like he could do all of that without taking a break. And once Bachara would leave, Isagi would start to think as his iconic puzzles would show. But as a kiddie, as a kid, as he would smirk and he'd say, "Okay, I need a push. I mean, I understand how metavision works, and I can use it as sparks. I can use it as embers, should I say. I can use it partially. So for about 2 seconds, and then I'm gassed. I mean, I'm not gassed on stamina since, trust me, I've built up that. But what the hell can I do?" As he'd start to think, and like I said, the puzzle pieces would be around, as he'd say, "Maybe I'm just not ready. Or is it the smarts? No, that can't be it." And he would think, and he'd come to a solution. "Okay, I'll try to find a push." And so he'd walk out and he'd go to where Bachara is, and he'd see Bachara just walk out of the bathroom naked. And, because that's kind of what Bachara does. Yeah. He wouldn't mind it as he's used to seeing, Bachara do it, so he doesn't really care. As he'd walk past him, go shower, get, all that, right? Bachara and Isagi would be called out as they were told that they were going to be doing 2-on-2 practice matches until they get good enough, and then they will start to slowly add more people on. Isagi would think that this is just like the second phase of the almost at Hunter exams of Blue Lock. And he would smirk knowing that him alone was better than everyone here. Well, that's what he was telling himself. Like, I'm the best here. And as of right now, like with my current knowledge, ain't nobody beating me. And for the most part, that's true. But he would be paired up against two people that he would be very familiar with. He'd see Hiyori and Corona. As he'd be confused as he don't remember them being scouted for some, like they never spoke about being scouted for something like this. By the way, I'll take away my other statement because, I spoke before my brain thought about it. So, yeah, if they beat the other team, that the two people are added to their team, and then they go up against another group of four. And, yeah, even though, that's not fully like how Blue Lock was, because it was you add one after you win type shit. Yeah. I don't know why it's that type shit like that, but anyway. So Isagi would walk up to him and he would just feel that Hiyori's vision was somehow still better than his. Well, I'm pretty sure current Hiyori's vision isn't better than Isagi's, but as of now, Isagi would feel that even though that he's so close to Metavision, he feels as if Hiyori already has it. And Hiyori would look up at him as he'd say, I hope to have a great match. And Isagi would nod. And Corona would just smile at Hiyori since they had become pretty close friends in the time that they were, there. And Hiyori would be a little startled by Corona's teeth, but he'd just call him a shark. And everyone on the field would kind of chuckle about it. But they would be told to begin as Corona and Hiyori would start with the ball, as Isagi would be reading them and the field, as Bachira would get on Corona, who would have the ball. But Corona would hit him with a sharp turn and sprint past him. And Isagi would slide in front of him and take the ball, and he'd kick it to Bachira. But Hiyori would read the play like it was, like he was turning the page on a book, as he would trap the ball and he'd kick it past Bachira. And Isagi, seeing the curve on it, would say, okay, he was pretty good at this at a young age, it seems. He'd say, damn, these geniuses. Like he'd be kind of annoyed. But he would he'd be running after the ball. And he'd notice that Corona is still about as fast as him, despite his training. And he'd say, okay, I'll have to do something else. And right as Corona trapped the ball, Isagi would tap it downwards as it would bounce. And like it'd come off his foot and bounce on the ground. As Isagi would tap it over, and Bachira would take it and start running up the field. And Isagi would chase after him. And Corona would say, damn it. But, he's a child, so he'd say, dang it. And he'd start chasing after Isagi and Bachira. And Isagi would be looking at Hiyori as he just feel that Hiyori definitely has Metavision. And I know Hiyori probably didn't have Metavision as a child, but that man is a gamer. And he been watching all his life. So we gonna say that, he got meta vision, all right? Plus, I need Isagi. I need to have Isagi to have a push towards meta vision, you know. And so Isagi would be running, and Hiyori would get in the way of Bachira, but then he'd shift over in front of Isagi, and Bachira would have passed, as he's not as experienced as he is before, and the ball would come like flying directly towards where Hiyori is in front of Isagi, as Hiyori would take his eyes off of Isagi, and he'd go into his blind spot, and Hiyori would look back, and Isagi would say, yeah, he definitely has meta vision, but that won't stop me, as he'd jump and he'd kick around Hiyori, and the ball would go flying back to Bachira, and Hiyori would be shocked that Isagi went beyond what he could read, as he'd ask him, wait, do you have it as well? And Isagi would say, I'm glad you confirmed you have meta vision. And Hiyori, who is now chasing after Isagi, would ask, wait, do you know me or something? You speak as if you know me. And Isagi would say, I don't know you, but I know of meta vision. I mean, I possess it. Well, not currently, but I'm sure I can get there. And Isagi would say, and you'll be my push to fully get there. As he dashed past him, which would be shocking to Hiyori that Isagi could go faster. But Corona would also run past him as he would be chasing down Bachira. And Bachira would kick the ball, and it would be blocked by the goaltender. I said goaltender. Oh, hell no. The goalkeeper. My fault. I sincerely apologize to everyone I just pissed off with that statement. And the goalkeeper would be, it wouldn't be a kid who's like it'd be like an actual adult being the goalkeeper, right? And it like he was gonna let like pass shots go in, but like every now and again he was gonna block them, right? And so Bachira would have kicked, and it was going directly for him. So obviously he blocked it. But Isagi would get the ball as he would be at a weird angle. And Hiyori and Corona would have been on his ass. And so he would say, well, didn't think I'd have to pull this out so early. But then he'd stop as he'd say, no, I need to work on my trapping anyways. And so he trapped the ball, and he'd try to copy Nagi, but obviously he isn't Nagi. But he would somewhat stop the momentum of it as it would roll and off his foot, and he would chest bump it outwards as he dash and get into a position as he would think, all right, I want to see how good my direct shot works against a professional goalkeeper. And the goalie who was there, by the way, they hired professional goalkeepers to, and they obviously came because it's easy money. But yeah, Isagi would shoot the ball with his direct shot as it would fly directly at, like, it would fly towards the goal. I said goal. It would fly directly, at the goal. Like, it fly directly towards the goalie. Let's put it that way. And he'd be shocked that Isagi shot directly at him. And so he'd go to block it, but the ball would curve last second as it fly clean past his head and into the back of the net. And the guy would be shocked as Isagi would smirk as he didn't shoot with his right leg like normal. He shot with his left leg. And the guy would ask, he'd think, wait, that kid is ambidextrous? And Isagi would smirk while standing as he'd say, okay, that's one of how many points do we need to win? And the goalie would point back as it'd say first 1 to 3. And Hiyori and Corona would see Isagi's, they thought he was right-footed. like he's gonna shoot with his right foot, but he let the ball roll after the chest bump, and he shot with his left. So he already would think, okay, maybe this guy is a lefty. But then again, I could have sworn he was right-footed because he jumped around me and kicked the ball with his right. But maybe that's just whatever. And they would reset as Corona would take off faster this time, with Hiyori keeping in his own lane with the ball. And Isagi would be man marking him, making sure that he would have no openings to shoot. But Hiyori's metavision would allow him to see past what Isagi could see in that moment. But Isagi who would have been thinking this whole time, I have to read it. 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 He would have his puzzles flying around him, and he'd say, okay, I can comfortably. Oh, hell no. What the fuck? Comfortably. Oh, he would be able to ain't no fucking way I'm struggling with English, and this is my bro. He would comfort. Okay. He would be ready. We're gonna stop that there. He would be ready and willing to just let it all go. He'd say, all right, I can fully just change myself. I can at least go that far, right? And he'd change his perception as he'd say, I think I can do it now. And he'd close his eyes, and Hiyori in that moment would see a weak spot in Isagi's defense. 1 second. As Hiyori would open, like he would fully activate his metavision, and I know this isn't a picture of Hiyori. Yeah, I didn't feel like going down the countless pictures I have, but yeah, for right now, this is gonna be Hiyori, okay? Just for this installment. So Hiyori would fully activate his metavision, and he'd go to shoot I almost said shoot. He'd go to pass the, but that's when he'd feel something goes off, as he would slide to the right, as Isagi's foot would have moved into his path of passing. And so he'd say, fuck it. Also, I'm pretty sure this also may not be Hiyori. I just swiped over. I saw it. I didn't really look at it. Again, shut up, bro. I have flicks of Hiyori in my phone, okay? Like hella. Like we got flicks of Hiyori in here, okay? I could have went to any of the others, but So, we're going to leave it here, all right? Right there. Okay, so he would slide to the right and he'd say, you know what, fuck it. And he'd go to shoot the ball as his eyes would flare with their first embers of ego. And Corona would appear from behind Isagi. As Isagi would go to move, his eyes are still closed as he would hold out his left hand, keeping Corona behind him. And in that moment, in that instance, Hiyori would say, got you. And he would Hiyori would shoot the ball, and that's when Isagi would push off of Corona, and he would spin around, and now his right foot is behind him as he kicked, and his eyes would be wide open as he'd slam his foot into the ball that Hiyori had just kicked into the air, like it was going towards the goal. And his foot would slam into the ball as it would go flying out of bounds. As he'd say, good thing I remembered Shido, or else I would have missed that. I mean, I don't like the guy, and I can't say we're friends, but he's pretty cool. Well, his moves are. And Hiyori would be shocked as Isagi would turn and look at him, just like in the flick, as Hiyori would say, wait, you've been hiding your metavision this whole time? I thought you said you didn't have it. Isagi would say, nah, you kind of pushed me to awaken it again. And Hiyori would say, again? And Isagi would say, next question. And Hiyori would grow suspicious of Isagi's move, but Corona would say, yo, that was cool as hell. And Isagi would say thanks, but the ball's yours, kind of kicked it out of bounds. And the two would reset with, well, not reset, but, like Corona would be on the move with Bachira marking him, and Isagi would be there waiting for Corona to even kick the ball. And Corona, I said Corona to kick the ball. He would be waiting for Hiyori to kick the ball in bounds. And Hiyori would feel that Isagi's metavision is just way better than his. Like, sure, Corona would say he sees multiple paths to pass to, but most of them are blocked off by Isagi, besides 3. A very high pass that is risky, and Bachira might get to it. A low pass that is a fake for a high pass, which Isagi might block. Or a very hard curve towards the goal, and just hope that Corona gets there before Bachira. And he would bank it all on that curve. As he would kick the ball, and Isagi would have been shocked. He'd be like, wait, as a kid, he would take that shot? So you've always been an egoist. And he'd dash off, like running as fast as he can. But he'd notice that Corona is going to get there before him. And the goalie would go to move since, a straight ball is heading his way. But then Corona would jump up as he'd turn his back to the goalie. And he would headbutt the ball, like, slightly. Like, he'd jump up. Like, the goalie, he didn't, like, fully stand up. Like, he was just he crawled. Well, not crawled, but he's on his knees. Pause. Because he was just chilling, thinking that, they wouldn't get over there. But seeing that risky-ass shot, he was, like, trying to get up. Like, he was starting to stand up to go grab the ball. But Corona would jump with his back turned to him, making the guy slam, like his head would hit Corona in the back, which would cause Corona to momentarily lose focus. But he would lift his head up and hit his head over as hard as he could as the ball would go, like it hit him in the forehead, but roll off his forehead into the goal. As he'd land, wouldn't land, but like he'd fall to the ground and he'd be like, damn, that hurt. Like, just like that. And Isagi would say, okay, you both were monsters since kids. That makes sense. And he'd smirk saying, us 4. This is my team. And so, no, yeah. It's going to be one person. Yeah, by the way. Yeah, they can only take one person because I have an idea. Yeah, like, have an idea. Yeah. But, yeah, so, 1 second. Alright, I'm back. I may have paused just to eat a little snack. I won't lie. But, yeah. Alright, I'm back. So, yeah, now the score would be 1-1. As Isagi would smirk, and like I said, he would think that they're both monsters, and instantly he would formulate a plan to get around both of them, and he already knew who he wanted off this team. As he would stare at Corona, as he'd say, I'll need him more than I need Hiyori at this moment, but if given the chance, I'd like to grab Hiyori next. And he'd go up to Bachira as he'd say, yo, Bachira, we have to win this now. And Bachira would, he'd, salute as he'd say, aye, aye. And Isagi would say, well, time to reset. And the 2 goalies who had just seen these 2 outstanding plays from these children would be shocked as he'd be like, how are these kids performing like this? Like, what's up with these kids? Because like I said, these four originally were not in this program. So, Isagi would walk back up and he tapped the ball to Bachira, who would dash upfield, and Isagi would he'd run directly at Hiyori. And Hiyori and him would be staring at each other when all of a sudden Isagi would run clean past Hiyori and he'd be staring him down with his metavision. And Hiyori, who wasn't expecting this at all, would be like, no way, how is he doing this? As Isagi would have, basically what Isagi would have did while running completely at him. Hiyori, who also has metavision, he's paying attention to the ball and Isagi simultaneously. So for a second, Isagi stepped inside and then right out, which caused him to gain a momentary blind spot. That Isagi went close, then around, as Hiyori would have looked to his right. But now Isagi is going back towards the inside, and Isagi would have ran clean past him. And Hiyori would turn back and see Isagi running past him. As the two goalies would be confused, like, what's up with this one kid? Like, what's up with him? And why is he exuding such a pressure that only certain adults would exude? And Isagi would just cleanly go past Hiyori, who would still be stunned as he'd be like, he just now gained metavision, yet he's outplaying me. How is he doing this? And Hiyori would start to see Isagi as this giant monster that just grows immediately, that adapts to your techniques immediately. As he would say, is he Maharaga? I know Maharaga, I know they don't. Anyways, that's legit what he would compare Isagi to. He would think that Isagi is like Maharaga. And so he would start to chase down Isagi with this image of Maharaga, a giant behind Isagi, with metavision, as it'd just be a giant Maharaga with metavision. As he'd be like, what will he adapt to next? And Hiyori, who would be on Bachira, would almost take the ball, but Bachira would pull a roulette around him as, like I said, he's growing and alarmingly fast. He would clear past Corona and he would shoot the ball as he'd score a goal. And basically, he just scored the same goal he scored when he scored first on Team Z. Where he'd stop and tap the ball with the back of his right foot. Yeah, basically, he'd scored out one. Yeah, so, yeah, they just cooked them. There's no other way to say that. They would cook them, and it wouldn't be funny, as Isagi would stop and stare them down just like this after the match, as he'd say, I want Corona. And he'd look at Hiyori as he'd say, you grow in the time that we're apart, because I'm coming for you next. And Hiyori would, he'd just nod as he'd say, he's so cool. And Corona would also think the same thing, as he'd be like, this guy is so cool. And now we have a trio of Bachira, Isagi, and Corona, as they would go back to their room, as they would now have a different room, but it'd be basically the same thing, just now with 3 beds. And Isagi wouldn't really care. He'd go shower, he'd go to the field, he'd go train, do his same training routine. He'd train both Corona and Bachira. Then he'd go take another bath and then go to sleep. Alright, I'm back. So, after that, Bachira would just tell Corona that Isagi is just a freak when it comes down to training. He loves to train, and he is still one of the best people that he knows. Isagi is just like that, he would say. Sorry about that. The bitch is good as fuck. Yeah, Isagi would, be chilling as he'd say, so, Piranha, Bachara, I want to try a formation with you two. You feel like trying it? And they'd be up for it since they didn't have a match this day. By the way, it's a day later. 2 days later since. By the way, they did not gain because they haven't played any matches. They're waiting because the first people who played, sure, they teams won, but none were on their level. And like, because the goalies would have told them to specifically watch their match, and like I said, they don't have cameras in their practice rooms, but in the game room, they have cameras. And so they would watch it, and they'd be like, "These kids are on a higher level than the rest of them," and they'd be like, "Should we just send them to Noah?" And the guy over the heads would be like, he said he wants to see what the blue haired kid has before they actually put him up. Since sure he had great passes, but he didn't really have any good skills by himself. And the guy would be like, "Is he crazy? Did he not see that pass?" And the guy would be like, "Listen, I know, like I said, the kids' passes are amazing. We get that. But they're not on Sei Itoshi's level." Well, Sai, whatever you want to call him. I call him Sei Itoshi, bro. Sei. Anyways, yeah, he'd be like, he's not on Sai Itoshi's level. Sei, whatever, bro. He's not on his level, right? And the guy would say, "Of course not. He's 7." And he'd say, "So what? Sai Itoshi was great at age 7. That kid has barely reached what Sai Itoshi could do at 7. Sai. It just don't sound right, but oh well. Whatever comes out of my mouth comes out of my mouth, all right?" So he'd be like, "All right, you know what? How about this? In their next match against that black-haired kid, dark blue hair, whatever, against that kid, with the overwhelming pressure, the next time he plays him, you can make up whether or not he goes to the next part of the program or not." And he'd say, "Okay, I will. I will." And like was stated, he would. And now we go to Isagi, Bachara, and Corona as they are just chilling, relaxing. As they are now in a situation where, that they are playing against Corona. I said Corona. Oh, hell no. Nah. We have Isagi, Corona, and Bachara up against Hiyori, this random guy, and the kid that looks like Baro. But it's not Baro, by the way. Like, Isagi, like, that's what Isagi would say. That kid looks like Baro. Now, Bachara would say, who is Baro? You know what? Actually, yeah, let's say it's Baro, because I need him to have a reason to be madder at Isagi. Yeah, so he would be pissed. Well, he'd be pissed that he wasn't. Well, why the fuck am I speaking for the future? I don't know why I'm doing that. Sorry. He would walk on the stage exclaiming that he's the king of the field, and Isagi would say, "Nah, you're just a donkey, bro. Chill." And this would piss him off, as he'd say, "What did you just say to me?" And Isagi would say, "Listen, I'm done talking. You're a yap monster. I don't want to hear it." And this would piss off Baro, as soon as it be said to begin, Isagi would step forward with the ball, and he would rush at Isagi, and Isagi would feel, well, since he's a kid, he would feel the same pressure from before, but Isagi is better than him, as Isagi would stare, hold on. I thought I had the picture up ready. Hold on. Isagi would stare him down just like this and say, fuck off. And sprint clean past him. As Baro would like freeze in his boots. Like freezing his tracks like right there. And Corona and Pachiro would have laughed at him while coming. But Hiyori would slide in Isagi's way. As he'd say, I've gotten better, Isagi. As he'd say, it's nice you remembered my name. But so have we. And Hiyori would say, I'm not worried about those two. As Baro would come charging in from behind Isagi. And Isagi would just be chilling. And he'd say, okay, seems you made a plan to take me on, but hold on. Do you both think you can beat me? As he would tap the ball backwards, as Baro's foot would hit it, as it go flying past Hiyori, who would be shocked that Isagi took a risk like that. And Isagi would run past Hiyori, but Hiyori wouldn't be phased long as he'd chase after Isagi, only to see the ball land directly at Corona's feet, who would, he'd hit a sharp-ass right turn on the guy. Like, the dude would, run at Corona, and he'd get directly in Corona's face. Okay, hold out your hand. Barely enough to where it's fully out. No, actually, hold out your arm as far as you can, right? With your hand up, he'd be that close to Corona. As Corona would hit a sharp right on him and then hit a left to get behind him, as the guy would turn around as Corona would be on his back and gone. And then the other guy who would leave Bachira, being a stupid mistake, and Hiyori would notice this as he would have stopped chasing Isagi and went straight for Bachira, as on cue, Corona would have passed it towards Bachira. And Isagi, who would have been shocked that Hiyori read the situation before him, but not really, since older Hiyori was able to keep up with his thinking as well. So, and at one point was above him in, in his spatial awareness. He was above Isagi already. So, yeah. He would see the ball and he'd say, all right, oh, hell no. And he'd rush at him at full speed. And Hiyori would get the ball before Isagi. And when Isagi got there, Hiyori would tap the ball over Isagi. And Isagi would think it was a pass. But as soon as Isagi turned, the ball would hit him on top of the head. And he'd turn around and say, what the hell? As Hiyori would laugh and he would do a roulette around Isagi, getting the falling ball, and he'd rush up. As Isagi would be a bit annoyed, but he'd say, he'd be a bit annoyed, thinking, okay, oh hell no. There's gonna be a lot of oh hell no's in this story, in this video. Anyways, Isagi would have said, thought, I would have expected this from Bachira, but from Hiyori, okay. As he would start to run after Hiyori, now a bit annoyed, but Baro would run full sprint on both of them. And Isagi would sidestep Baro, and so would Hiyori, as he would now be in motion to shoot. And Isagi would say, damn it, Baro got in the way. And right then, almost at Corona, Bachira would go and try to get in Hiyori's way, but Hiyori would have already had shot. And the ball would go clean for the goal, it would curve. And Isagi would say, okay, so at this age, he could also shoot curved shots. He's pretty good for his age. I mean, better than me, since I'm not that good at curved shooting, but oh well. And the ball would curve enough and the goalie would go to block it, but it would, he would miss. He would swing at the ball. He's a professional now. Don't forget this. He's a professional. So he would have swung and the ball would have went over his, it would have hit him, and he would have hit the ball, but it would have rolled over his hand and into the back of the net. Well, side of the net, since, he got a touch on it. So it would have slammed into the side of the net. And Hiyori would, he'd be chilling, but he'd be like, that wasn't good enough. He got a hand on it. And Isagi would say, that was pretty good. And Hiyori would say, but that wasn't good enough for you, was it? And Isagi would say, nah. Okay, that time that was a part of the story, by the way. And Bachira would say, hey, where did you get that? As he'd say, I found it on the field. Somebody dropped it, so I thought it looked good and ate it. As Bachira would whine about him eating his snack, and Corona would walk up to Hiyori and say, it was a pretty good goal. And Hiyori would tell Corona that he was thankful for the compliment, but he's sure that being with Isagi made Corona able to produce a goal that one of the goalies couldn't even stop. As Corona would say, no, not really. I mean, we have a technique that we created, and with Bachira, it improved a lot, and I'm assuming he wants to bring you in to improve that further. And Isagi would say, you're pretty smart, Corona, but I need to see if he can go beyond even my thinking in this match. And Hiyori, who would have already been thinking of a play, as everyone would reset, Baro would charge at Isagi as soon as they were announced they could go. And Isagi and his team would speed up the field, They would be dominating the field. But this time when Isagi shot, it would have been off. Why? As he would start to feel something was wrong. As he'd say, shit, I'm overusing metavision. And his direct shot would start to wobble in the air as he would have hit it and the ball would have curved. And so it would have started wobbling. Like, how Chris Prince, I'm pretty sure that was his name, when he shot and he said he had this unexpected shot. Basically, Isagi's shot would be doing that, as Isagi would have gained a new weapon from his metavision fucking up. As he'd say, okay, I like that shot. I just have to practice it. As the ball would start to wiggle in the air, and the goalie would not know which way it was going to end up. And Isagi would say, okay, I just need to add more power behind it next time because it's going pretty slow. And Isagi would start to dash up thinking that the goalie might block it. But hold on. I would pause it, but I don't feel like doing never mind. I didn't feel like pausing it, but I paused it anyway. Basically, after Isagi would have shot, Hiyori would have jumped in the way and he would have blocked it, just like this. As when the ball would fall, Baro would get it and rush upfield, but Hiyori would start to run upfield right behind him. As he would look Baro in the face and he'd think basically as Isagi did, give it. And Baro would pass the ball out of fear of those, what are these two? And he would have been scared into passing the ball, and Hiyori would have got it. As he would think, okay, I'll shoot it. And Isagi would slide in his way, but that's when Hiyori would have faked the pass, and Isagi wouldn't have fell for it. But then he'd realize that wasn't a fake pass, as the ball would have been gone, and Hiyori would have been running upfield. And he'd glare over at Baro again and think the same words, give it. And Baro this time would be reluctant. And so the teammate, out of fear, because Hiyori would have looked at the other teammate, he would have slid tackled and took the ball from Baro and then kicked it over. And it would have flew past Corona. And Corona would have ran for the ball, but Hiyori would have gotten the ball again. But instead of allowing himself to fall with his left foot, yes, I said his left. I know he is an ambidextrous, but with his left foot, he would slam his foot into the ball, and the ball would go flying upwards. And Corona would have slid past him, and Bachira would have came, and he would have been running that way to stop him. And Isagi would be like, "Wait, this feels familiar. As when Bachiro would have gotten in the way, again, he'd pop the ball up. And Isagi would say, this is very familiar. He's doing a volley, and he would rush at him. And he would go to not slide tackle, but to get in his way. But Hiyori, who would have seen this, would have caught the ball. And he basically would have did what Bachiro did to Zantetsu. He would have trapped it and faked going to the right. But in this case, it would have been a fake going to the left, as Isagi would have fell for it, as he'd go to block it, but then Hiyori would tap the ball up over Isagi. And then he'd slam his right foot into the ball, as he'd shoot it, as it curved and slam it to the back of the net. As Isagi would smirk, and which would be, like he'd smirk, and it'd be hidden by his hair, as he'd be looking down, as he'd think, he outplayed me. Well, that just goes to show I'm pretty immature. But to think I'd fall for something that was a bootleg remix of something I fell for before. It feels... I'm gonna hate going up against Nagi now. And Isagi would look up at Hiyori, who would have been smiling, but he would start to fall, and Isagi would catch Hiyori, and he'd say, I'm good. As he'd start to stretch, and he'd deactivate his meta vision, and he'd look at Isagi. You can end the game now. And the people, like, they don't watch the matches as they go on, because they wouldn't be surprised by the kids. So the two goalies are the only two who just saw that outstanding ass play that Hiyori pulled off, that even beat who they thought was the best player here, Isagi. And Isagi would play, like, his next play, he'd say, all right, since you showed me something cool, I'll show you something cool. And so when it's their turn to go, Isagi would tap it back towards towards Bachiro, who would rush upfield. 1 second, hold on.